I grew up in the countryside. We didn't have a lot, but my father introduced me to the glory of nature. And that wildlife is the most valuable thing on earth. I trained in countryside management, but nowadays I run a gun shop and I'm a YouTuber.
Fieldsports community is filled with negative people. Every community is, but our community seems to be very negative towards any change.
Yeah.
And we need to change.
Yeah.
So we might as well dictate the change ourselves, I hope.
Cooked up some of that boar from yesterday, and this is the complete circle of hunting. Increasingly, as the world digitises, field sports have found themselves under scrutiny.
I'm sick and tired of criminality and cruelty in our countryside.
And of all contemporary field sports, grouse shooting appears to be the most contentious.
My main gripe with the activity of some gamekeepers is the illegal killing of birds of prey, like hen harriers. You think they're few bad apples,
yes,
and I think there are more bad apples than you do.
The animosity between both sides creates a constant feed of biased information all around us. Separating fact from fiction seems an impossible task. Whether it's the ecological benefit, the persecution of raptors, or the cost to the taxpayer, both sides have very different stories. For those unfamiliar with the subject, the red grouse is a small upland bird that breeds and lives off of heather. In order to create a harvestable surplus, the moorlands are managed, by gamekeepers, to boost the overall population of these ground nesting birds. To do this, gamekeepers use controlled burning to create a diverse range of plant life. This management is globally significant, with Britain having 75% of the world's heather moorland. The red grouse is put on a pedestal by hunters worldwide, not only because of their wild and unpredictable nature and jet-like speed, but because these birds are exclusive to upland Britain, and they taste great. To find out what's actually going on, I'm going to head up north and spend the next few days on and around some grouse moors. My first meeting was with Ian, a head keeper in the Yorkshire Dales.
Apologies for the broadness of this question, but what does a grousekeeper do?
We work up on the moors. I mean, our sole job is to look after the grouse, the red grouse that live up on the moors here, and they predominantly feed on the heather. So a big part of our job is managing the heather by control burning through winter. We're taking the canopy off the heather in small managed patches, creating sort of the patchwork, the patchwork quilt sort of effect.
The moor, I presume, affects the valley below financially.
We are quite a big traditional estate, so we have the grouse shooting on the moors, we have the pheasant shooting, pheasant partridge shooting in the lower ground, and the salmon fishing on the river. We manage all the woodlands, all the dry stone walls. A good grouse season helps to pay for a lot of the walls, the tree planting. So it's
yourself.
And from the job, my job and my family and my underkeeper's family and the other staff on the estate. More grouse there is and more funds we can bring in, the more work we can do up on the moors.
Pest and predator control is obviously a large part of the job. How does that go?
So yeah, pest and predator control, it's absolutely key to our job. Love watching broods of stoats and how they play and a litter of cubs.
You still admire them?
You still sit and watch on dusk, watch a litter of cubs playing around, but you know how much damage they do, and you know if you don't control them, they could wipe a whole beat out, the whole drive out. Not just the grouse, all the waders and everything.
Do you have a lot of raptors on the place?
We have a lot of raptors, yeah, probably nearly all the species of raptors here at Bolton are breeding. We do quite a bit of work with BTO, Natural England, we're monitoring merlin nests and merlin sites.
You got some merlins here?
We've got merlins here, yeah. If you're looking out here, we've probably got 3 nests, 2 on the opposite bank here, and we've got another nest in here this time. So on the estate, probably 4 or 5 nests. And we've done quite a lot of work with Natural England, monitoring the nest, and the keepers in the area have been granted Schedule 1 licences to approach the nests and monitor the nest, which is quite a new thing.
Nice.
So we are very conservation minded.
They're actually incentivising you to be connected to them.
Exactly.
Which is nice.
Exactly. We have the networks of keepers, so we're all in touch together. We're all talking, all coming up with new ideas, and moving forward with the times as well.
The management that keepers undergo is such an integral part of the delicate ecosystem. I couldn't help but wonder what the estate would look like without the grouse industry's influence. This takes me back to a conversation I had before I even started this journey.
I think it's a really complex situation because rewilding means so many different things to different people. The concept of just leaving the land to go back to a natural state just seems really farcical because we are part of that natural state as humans. We always have been. The way that we interact with the landscape shapes the landscape. The way that we interact with animals and plants shapes the animals and plants.
So you don't really believe in this sort of rewilding that is the popular theme of rewilding, that we just leave it and stand back and go, well, that's not rewilding to you?
I think there's ways that we can return it to a more natural and abundant state, a better ecosystem for everyone involved, for humans and for animals. However, I think within the modern world, especially within Britain with our scarcity of space, it's something that would be a lot harder to do than, say, somewhere like America and Sweden, which is where a lot of people draw their ideas of rewilding from. People, I think, have this idea that we can be neutral. We can just sort of walk in, have a look, step away. But even by walking into a space, you create a new path.
So how do you feel on that scale of positivity to negativity? How does the way that they manage grouse moorland feel to you as somebody who is sort of objective on the subject?
It's not simple because there's not a solid alternative there. And what it is in terms of what that landscape could be used for, it's incredibly positive because you have this space that's being managed well for one species and it's being managed for wildlife in general. However, it's still, yes, it has a wider wildlife benefit. However, it's still being managed for a very elite and very other, for most people to enjoy. So it's very difficult for me to sit with because it's just like, I love the fact that it's there. I like the fact that it's being well managed by people who've been managing for generations on generations on generations, so know that landscape really well. They have a real visceral connection to that ecosystem, and they have been educated of how to interact with that ecosystem, and a lot of them since like birth. Yeah. So I don't want to demean that because I don't know that ecosystem like they do. However, I also know that it's being run for a very select few people to enjoy, and it's so expensive.
So what is the alternative for upland Britain?
I don't. The answer is, I don't think there is a better alternative currently being proffered that can be sustainably managed without higher taxation of everybody.
I think that's what it all boils down to, and without losing biodiversity.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Martin.
Thank you very much.
Educative.
It's been good.
As Martin pointed out, the grouse shooting industry is regularly criticised for being too exclusive. I was interested to find out if there was more accessible shooting about. In my search, I came across Neil and Paul, who have dedicated the last 20 years to the accessibility of grouse shooting. So tell me about your moorland.
This is the 23rd year we've had it. We started off as a small syndicate and now we've got to where we are now. I could honestly say that there's more people shot grouse on that moor for the first time than any other moor in the country.
You've made it really easy and very accessible for people to come and enjoy the sport of grouse shooting.
Yes.
What is the general consensus of people when they come and experience it for the first time?
Oh, it's just overjoyed. You know, because they'd never get the opportunity to shoot grouse. We had a syndicate member who brought his son on his 12th birthday and shot his first grouse.
Wow.
And then we had a gentleman come on his 80th birthday, never been on a grouse moor in his life. He shot right and left on his 80th birthday.
Wow.
So, you know, that's what makes it all, that's what it's all about. Giving the enjoyment to people that couldn't afford shoot grouse.
What does the future look like in your head of grouse shooting? It's obviously quite a fragile political thing at the moment.
Yeah, it is. It's a bit like the whole shooting industry. It needs to be publicised a little bit better, I feel. Until we bring our argument to the table, we're always really going to be on the back foot.
You're defending, aren't you?
Yeah, you are. You're firefighting, basically. You're doing nothing more until people are a little bit more upfront about what we do and why we do it, and the benefits that has to everything, right across the whole moorland environment. Right through the grouse, the insects, everything has its place, and shooters see that and they know that, but they're not as keen as maybe the ecologists and the butterfly lovers to put this forward, because we're naturally quite defensive about it, because usually we're viewed as the bad guys doing this sort of stuff, and it's genuinely not the case. We're not doing any harm up there.
You were saying last season you usually shoot 10 days up there.
Yeah.
Last season you shot 1 drive.
We shot we shot 2 drives, shot half a day, 8 birds, and then realised that was we didn't have the birds that were required to carry on for the rest of the day. So, and that's the same on every grouse moor, right through the whole country. Even the big commercial moors, they only shoot the birds that they've got to shoot. They'll never shoot the stock, because obviously if you shoot your stock, you haven't got any birds for next year. So nobody's going to go out and we're not out to try and murder every grouse there is.
It is a completely sustainable harvest.
It is sustainable, and it has to be viewed that way more so than any other type of game shooting. You can release pheasants and you can release partridges, you cannot release grouse.
What is the alternative for that upland, that moor we were just on, up on the fell? What's the alternative? Currently it's used for light grazing and grouse shooting.
Yeah. I mean, it can only ever be used for light grazing because of its SSSI status. It's not something that can be used throughout the winter for grazing sheep and livestock and stuff like that on. And it does depend on, again, they're very heavily governed as to what the moor produces that year as well. If the moor doesn't grow a lot of grass, then they won't put a lot of sheep on it.
So that was a real pleasure to be invited into those people's homes to experience a little bit of their life. 2 things sort of stand out more than anything, and that was how accessible these people are making shooting, and that for me is a prime example of where shooting should be. The recession of the heather and how the uplands are changing really stood out to me. So now I'm going down to the University of Liverpool to meet with Professor Rob Mars, who is a specialist in ecology and moorland management.
So we're now sat here at the University of Liverpool with Professor Rob Mars, and he's going to talk me through effect of heather burning, effect of moorland management for grouse, and the positives and negatives of that. How do you feel about grouse shooting on the whole?
Well, I have virtually no feeling about grouse shooting on the whole. I mean, I don't grouse shoot, never have grouse shot, and as such, I see it just as a management in the uplands. My interest is purely scientific in that I want to understand how the habitats work.
So the moorland itself, apart from all of the fringe benefits that the owner might do the management for, is it ecologically a good thing? Does it have value?
Well, it does. There's a paper just been written by staff of the Game Conservancy showing that in a managed grouse moor, the conservation benefits are much better than unmanaged moors. But of course, it depends what you want as a target. If you are happy to accept a burned mosaic, then you will have a different suite of bird species, for example, from an unmanaged moor. So to some extent, management will impinge on what you get, but it depends on what you want.
It's just a different balance, essentially, is what you're working towards.
Absolutely, yeah. The positive thing about grouse shooting is, in my view, they produce a mosaic of heather patches using prescribed burning that's done over the winter and early spring in order to provide new shoots for the grouse chicks. I see the patchwork as a means of helping to prevent wildfire.
And wildfire is a big concern on unmanaged moors over the last few years, obviously.
Well, not just the last few years, it's an ongoing issue, because you have a fire-prone, fire-adapted shrub that is a dominant species, and in a dry year it will burn very easily. And once it's started, it's very difficult to stop, as we found out last year over to the east of Manchester.
What research needs to be done next in terms of upland management? Or do you think that it's a case of, if you're saying that burning or cutting is necessary, or is definitely beneficial, certainly to public moors, do you think that's something that should be put in place? And if so, how do we go about actually getting these things done?
The conservation agencies tend to not be in favour of burning or indeed cutting at the moment, because they would prefer a wetting up solution to provide a moss-based, sphagnum-based solution. I would like to see research in that actually show that it reduces fuel load and reduces fire risk. I think that's a key bit of information that's needed. And secondly, I think that further research in burning and cutting would be useful. Most of our knowledge about burning comes from a single experiment that I've worked on that was set up 2 years after I was born. And it's often criticised because it's supposedly atypical. Well, it's atypical in that it's a Tigger. It's the only one. There is no other. And that's the problem. You need to have, in any good science, you need to have good quality experiments in a range of situations. And unfortunately, in the uplands, time is not on your side. It always takes time.
How do you feel that science and politics and emotion seem to be being put into a bit of a blender at the moment on the issues of upland Britain?
I think we should take the emotion out of it completely and look at the data, the research data that comes out, because often in science you get a completely different answer to your perceived wisdom beforehand, and that's why you do proper experiments.
So you shouldn't be in search of answers, you should be in search of science.
Absolutely. The answers are what comes out of the experiments. You don't prejudge them, and you don't design experiments to prove something works or something doesn't work. You do an experiment to test a hypothesis.
I tell you, it's been absolutely fascinating. Thank you very, very much for meeting with me.
The professor taught me so much about wildfires and how and why they happen. This inspired me to go to Saddleworth Moor, an unmanaged moor near Manchester that unfortunately suffered a wildfire earlier this year.
Wow. I mean, I obviously knew the extent of the damage, but actually seeing it in real life, just one small portion of that face, it's overwhelming. Mature heather isn't something I've really encountered before because I've only ever been to managed areas. But if you look at this is nearly 3 foot tall. And if you can imagine that whole bank was covered in this, that's a lot of fuel. One of the things I learned from the professor was that to reduce the risk of wildfire, one has to reduce the fuel load. He says there's a few options for this, including cutting, burning, and a few other bits. However, burning is conclusively and scientifically the best proven way to reduce the risks of this sort of catastrophe. Should it be publicly funded? Well, I don't know is the answer. They're currently funding the re-wetting program that has no scientific basis. However, burning could happily be privately funded and is happily privately funded all over the country by the grouse industry. A fell runner showed us a path up the back of the hill and says you're going to get a much better view of the devastation from the top. And through the clouds across the back, everywhere you can see there's a network of black patches, all connected, all coming down to that bank. It really is quite a view. I'm not really sure how it makes me feel, but scared. The power of nature, that's for sure. What a view to wake up to, eh? Unfortunately, now we've got to get in the car and drive halfway across the country to Nidderdale, where we were going to be meeting with a keeper called Roy Burrows, who takes a more holistic approach to wildlife management.
With my journey drawing to an end, I thought I would take a moment to sit down and reflect on what I have learned. Shooting grouse, although popularised as an elitist sport, would seem to be accessible for less than the cost of a football ticket. As for claims that I've read that grouse moors are barren of life, they just aren't true. Out of all the possible uses for the uplands I've seen, it would appear grazing is just not good for wildlife. Unmanaged ground is fairly void of life, and more importantly is a huge fire risk. Amenity land seems to suffer too much human pressure to sustain life, and wind power has its own variety of human and animal conflicts. Each of the examples has some benefits to a small suite of wildlife, but none is as biodiverse as the mosaic of heather and bog that grouse moors provide. Anyway, let's go see Roy.
So, have you seen a change in heather coverage over your lifetime?
50 years ago, grazing increased. So sheep were very profitable, so they put a lot of sheep on the moor, and a lot of heather got lost in the last 50 years. And now we are starting to get that habitat back.
Yeah.
And it's not just blanket heather, it's heather, bilberry, cotton grass,
Moss.
Yeah. The sphagnum mosses, with the grip blocking and what we'll go and have a look at, the sphagnum moss, we're trying to create a lot more sphagnum moss. We're doing everything to encourage the sphagnum, because the sphagnum's good, it holds all the insect life, and the insect life is not just good for the grouse, it's great for all the waders. They'll all feed on it.
So it's about creating a bottom-up ecosystem.
It's creating a habitat what's suitable for everything, not just grouse. Not just grouse. Yeah, grouse is what pays the bills and looks after this, but we've also got a responsibility to look after the rest of the wildlife, and I care about that as well. I don't want it all to go for my kids. I want that to go on for generations.
So it is an artificial habitat, but it's managed for the greater good.
Yeah, if you come up here in spring and you sit on that hill in the spring and you early morning, you listen to the wildlife on here, it's alive.
Like a zoo.
It's a pleasure to be up here then. And you look back through your heather management, your burning, your predator control and all the other jobs we do on the moor, and it gives you that sort of satisfaction that you're part of helping that wildlife thrive.
That's real nice. And you're passionate about wildlife in itself?
Yeah, no, grouse is part of my job, but I'm passionate about all parts of wildlife, not just the grouse. I love the waders, I love insects. I have a big thing about insects. Yeah. Bees are my, I've got a thing about bees at the minute, but yeah, we've got to do everything to help these, because we are in danger of a country of losing a lot of these species, and if we're not here to look after them, who is going to be here to look after them?
Exactly.
Who's going to put that money into?
The government's not going to fund moorland management.
No, and well, that's what looks at you. If you go into other parts of the country which isn't managed moorland, there isn't the birds there.
People can. There's an unmanaged moor a couple of days ago, and there's nothing.
Yeah.
We've walked here and we've already seen plenty.
Yeah. So yeah, we've got to be proud about that. I want to make sure that's there for my kids and hopefully their kids to see in the future.
Earlier in my journey, I met a guy called Martin, and he's very much into his rewilding and wilderness, and his main thing was it's about being connected and being a positive part of wildlife, as opposed to trying to manage it without being a part of it. And I think that's a lot of the problem we face, is people are just removed from being a part of that wildlife cycle, which you obviously are a major part of.
Well, we're involved with the wildlife, not just on the moor, but it goes down throughout the estate. On the moorland edges, we plant a lot of woodland, and all that woodland is with wild. It's all native woodland. It's not quick grow conifers.
Not for timber.
It's not for timber. It's native woodland, oaks, hazels, holly, mountain ash, birch.
And that is for shooting as much as the wider wildlife.
It will help with the shooting, but it's also going to help with the natural environment, the biodiversity, flood management, the wildlife population, the bird life. We've created corridors for the birds to travel up. Yeah. The insect life. There wasn't a lot of insect life, so that's going to create insect life. And then we go further into the farmland, putting pollinator mixes in for the bees. We're putting herbs into the grassland. It's a small scale, but hopefully by that small scale we're making a difference, not just to the shooting and the farming, but for the
planet.
Well, I hope we're doing that, and as we progress and learn and it's successful, hopefully other people start doing that as well. What we do generate from shooting helps us to be able to fund a lot of these projects.
This journey has taught me a lot. The recurring theme from both sides of this discussion is that management is essential. Whether the target is to boost your wildlife, via management, or to earn revenue, it seems impossible to get the most out of upland Britain without human intervention. Everybody agrees that biodiversity must have diversity. None of the people I met want a blanket of heather moorland. They all agree that there is various uses for upland Britain, as long as they are beneficial to wildlife and nature. Every gamekeeper I have met is really just a conservationist who's being paid for via game shooting. Grouse shooting might not be for everybody, but it is for conservation.